Detective Lopez was halfway through her morning coffee when the phone rang. It was one of those typical Tuesday mornings where nothing much was happening in the city. The kind of morning where officers caught up on paperwork and hoped for a quiet shift. "Detective Lopez speaking," she answered, expecting another routine call about a stolen bicycle or a noise complaint. The voice on the other end was different, though. Nervous, shaky. The caller was trying to whisper, but also wanted to be heard clearly. "There's something going on at 1247 Maple Street," the voice said. "People coming and going at all hours. Strange cars, packages being delivered when it's dark outside." Lopez grabbed a pen and started writing. She'd been a detective for 15 years, and anonymous tips like this could mean anything. Sometimes they led to major cases. Sometimes they were just nosy neighbors complaining about someone who worked night shifts. "Can you tell me your name?" Lopez asked. "I can't do that," the caller said quickly. "I just think you should know what's happening over there." "What exactly have you seen?" The caller took a deep breath. "Last week I saw 3 different cars pull up to that house between midnight and 2 in the morning. People would get out, go inside for maybe 20 minutes, then leave. And yesterday someone delivered a big package to the back door when it was completely dark." Lopez was writing fast now. "Can you describe the people you saw?" "Mostly men. Some women. They all looked nervous, you know? Like they were checking over their shoulders all the time." "And the package? Big brown box?" "The person who delivered it didn't use the front door. They went straight to the back like they knew exactly where to go." Lopez had heard enough calls like this to know when someone was genuinely concerned versus when they were just trying to cause trouble for a neighbor. This caller sounded scared, not angry. "Is there anything else you think I should know?" "The woman who lives there, Elena Vasquez, she seems normal during the day. But at night it's like a different world over there." The line went quiet for a moment. "I have to go," the caller said suddenly. "Just please look into it." The phone clicked dead before Lopez could ask any more questions. She stared at her notes for a moment. Anonymous tips were tricky. You couldn't ignore them, but you also couldn't just rush in based on what one person claimed to see. Lopez had learned that the hard way during her early years as a detective. She walked over to her computer and typed in the address. 1247 Maple Street came up on the screen with all the basic information. The house was owned by Elena Vasquez, a 45-year-old woman with no criminal record. Not even a parking ticket. That was interesting. In Lopez's experience, most people had at least some minor run-ins with the law. A speeding ticket here, a late tax payment there, but Elena Vasquez's record was completely clean. Too clean, maybe. Lopez printed out everything she could find about the address and the owner. Then she walked over to her partner's desk. Detective Williams was reading through case files when Lopez dropped the papers in front of him. "Take a look at this," she said. "Got an anonymous tip about possible illegal activity." Williams picked up the papers and read through them. He was the kind of detective who'd seen everything in his 20 years on the force. Nothing surprised him anymore. "Clean record," he said after a few minutes. "What kind of illegal activity are we talking about?" Caller didn't say specifically, but people coming and going at night, packages being delivered in the dark. "You know what that usually means," Williams nodded. "Could be dealing, could be nothing." "What do you want to do?" "I think we should watch the house for a few days. See what we can see. Sounds reasonable. I'll set up surveillance. The next 3 days changed everything." Lopez and Williams took turns watching 1247 Maple Street from an unmarked car parked down the block. What they saw convinced them that the anonymous caller had been right to be concerned. On the first night, Lopez watched as 4 different cars pulled up to the house between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Each car would stay for about 15 to 20 minutes, then leave. The people getting out of the cars all behaved the same way. They would look around nervously before walking quickly to the front door. On the second night, Williams saw a delivery truck pull up to the back of the house at 1:30 a.m. The driver unloaded several large boxes and carried them to the back door. Elena Vasquez came out to help carry the boxes inside. The whole thing took less than 10 minutes, but it was the third night that really got their attention. Lopez was watching when a car pulled up that she recognized. It belonged to Tommy Chen, a small-time dealer who'd been arrested twice in the past year. Tommy got out of his car, looked around nervously, and walked to the front door. He stayed inside for exactly 18 minutes, then came out looking much more relaxed than when he'd gone in. 20 minutes later, another car arrived. This time it was driven by a woman Lopez had seen before in mugshots. Katie Rodriguez had been arrested for possession with intent to distribute just 6 months earlier. "We've got ourselves a drug house," Lopez said into her radio. Williams agreed. "The pattern is clear. This isn't just people visiting a friend." They decided to bring in their informant Rico. Rico had been helping the police for 2 years in exchange for reduced charges on his own case. He was good at getting information from the streets without raising suspicion. Rico came back to them 3 days later with exactly what they needed to hear. "Elena Vasquez is definitely dealing," he said. "Word on the street is she's got good stuff and she's reliable. People trust her because she's been consistent for months." "What kind of volume are we talking about?" Williams asked. "Serious weight," Rico said. "This isn't some college kid selling to friends. She's moving enough product to supply half the dealers on the east side." Lopez felt that familiar excitement that came with a big case. This could be the kind of bust that took a major player off the streets. "Rico, can you get close to her operation?" "Maybe, but it would take time. She's careful about who she lets in." "We don't have time," Williams said. "If she's moving that much product, we need to move fast before she figures out we're watching." Lopez agreed. They had enough evidence for a search warrant. The surveillance, the informant information, and the pattern of behavior all pointed to a significant drug operation. That evening, Lopez sat at her desk writing up the warrant application. She'd done this dozens of times before, but something felt different about this case. Maybe it was how normal Elena Vasquez seemed during the day, or maybe it was the way the house looked so ordinary on its tree-lined street. But the evidence was clear. They had a drug dealer operating out of 1247 Maple Street, and it was their job to stop her. The warrant was approved the next morning. Lieutenant Commander Peterson would lead the tactical team for the raid. Peterson was known for running clean operations. He'd been leading raids for 8 years without a single serious incident. As Lopez handed over the case files to Peterson, she felt confident they were doing the right thing. The investigation had been thorough, the evidence was solid, and they had an experienced team ready to execute the warrant. What none of them knew was that their carefully planned operation was about to go very, very wrong. Lieutenant Commander Peterson stared at the case files spread across his desk. It was 4:30 in the morning, and his tactical team would be moving out in less than 2 hours. The coffee in his mug had gone cold, but he barely noticed. He was too focused on making sure every detail was perfect. Peterson had been leading tactical operations for 8 years. In that time, he'd executed over 200 search warrants. Drug houses, gang operations, weapons dealers, he'd seen it all. But there was something about this case that made him uneasy, though he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Maybe it was the location. 1247 Maple Street sat in the middle of a quiet residential neighborhood. Kids rode bikes on the sidewalks. People walked their dogs in the morning. It wasn't the kind of place where you'd expect to find a major drug operation, or maybe it was Elena Vasquez herself. Her record was too clean. In Peterson's experience, people who ended up running serious drug operations had a history. They started small and worked their way up. They had arrests for possession, minor dealing, something that showed a pattern. But Vasquez had nothing. Still, the evidence was solid. Detective Lopez and her partner had done good work. The surveillance photos showed clear patterns of behavior that indicated drug dealing. The informant had confirmed what they suspected. Everything pointed to Elena Vasquez running a significant operation out of her house. Peterson called his team together for the final briefing. Officer Chen would cover the back door. Officers Rodriguez and Kim would take the sides of the house. Peterson would lead the entry team through the front door. "Remember," Peterson told his team, "we go in fast and hard. Don't give anyone inside time to destroy evidence or grab weapons. But stay sharp. Something about this one feels different." Officer Chen raised his hand. "Different how, Lieutenant?" Peterson paused. "How do you explain a gut feeling to a room full of cops who deal in facts and evidence?" "Just stay alert," he said finally. "Trust your training, but be ready for anything." The team loaded their gear into the vehicles at 5:15 a.m. Body armor, helmets, the battering ram they called Big Bertha, and all the other equipment needed for a high-risk entry. Peterson checked and double-checked that everyone had their assignments memorized. The drive to Maple Street took 12 minutes. As they got closer to the target house, Peterson felt his heart rate increase. It was normal pre-raid nerves, but this felt more intense than usual. At 5:45 a.m., the team took their positions around 1247 Maple Street. The sun was just starting to come up, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. A few houses down, someone's sprinkler system kicked on, making the only sound on the otherwise silent street. Peterson looked at his watch. 5:58 a.m., 2 minutes. He tested his radio one more time. "All units, radio check. Back door. Ready," came Chen's voice. "East side. Ready," Rodriguez reported. "West side. Ready," Kim confirmed. Peterson's entry team consisted of himself and 3 other officers. They had practiced this exact scenario dozens of times in training. Get through the door fast, secure the interior, and make sure no one could destroy evidence or escape. Exactly. Peterson gave the signal. The first swing of Big Bertha cracked the doorframe. The second swing sent the door flying inward with a sound like thunder. Peterson's team poured through the opening, shouting commands that had become second nature. "Police! Search warrant! Get on the ground! Show me your hands!" Peterson expected chaos. People running, screaming, trying to flush drugs down toilets or jump out windows. That's what always happened when they hit a drug house. Instead, they found something that made Peterson's blood run cold. Elena Vasquez was standing in her kitchen, calmly pouring coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing for a while. She was a small woman, maybe 5 feet 4 inches tall, with gray hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was wearing a blue bathrobe and slippers. When Peterson's team burst through her front door with weapons drawn and voices shouting, Elena Vasquez didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't throw her hands up in panic like every other person Peterson had ever seen during a raid. Instead, she looked up from her coffee cup with the kind of calm that comes from years of training. Her eyes were sharp and alert, taking in every detail of the officers surrounding her. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said in a voice that was steady and controlled. "I was wondering when you'd get here." Peterson felt confused. This wasn't how drug dealers reacted to being raided. They were supposed to be surprised, panicked, desperate. They weren't supposed to act like they'd been expecting the police to show up. "Ma'am, we have a search warrant for this property," Peterson said, though he was beginning to wonder if they were in the right house. "I'm sure you do," Elena said, setting down her coffee cup. "And I'm sure it's all perfectly legal." She reached slowly into the pocket of her bathrobe. Peterson's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. In his experience, when suspects reached into pockets during raids, they were usually going for drugs they wanted to destroy or weapons they wanted to use. But Elena's movement was deliberate and calm. She pulled out a leather wallet and held it up so Peterson could see it clearly. "Before we go any further," she said, "I think you should take a look at this." Peterson approached carefully. Elena flipped open the wallet, with the kind of practiced motion that comes from doing something thousands of times. Inside was a gold badge and an identification card that made Peterson's world stop. Spinning Special Agent Elena Vasquez, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The badge looked real. The identification looked real. But Peterson's mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Drug dealers didn't carry FBI badges. Even fake ones would be too risky to possess during a raid. "This has to be fake," Peterson said, though even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed it. Elena's expression didn't change. "I assure you, Lieutenant Commander, it's very real. As real as the 18-month undercover operation you just compromised." Peterson felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Undercover operation? But the surveillance had been clear. The informant had confirmed drug dealing. Everything pointed to Elena Vasquez being exactly what they thought she was. "Ma'am, we're going to need to verify this," Peterson said, though his voice sounded uncertain even to himself. "Of course you are," Elena replied. "But while you're making your phone calls, you should know that several members of your surveillance team were photographed by cartel spotters. My cover isn't just blown, my life is now in danger." Peterson's radio crackled to life. It was Officer Chen from the back door. "Lieutenant, we've got a problem out here. Found what looks like surveillance equipment hidden in the trees behind the house." Elena nodded. "Federal surveillance equipment. Part of the operation you just destroyed." Peterson's mind was racing. If Elena Vasquez really was an FBI agent running an undercover operation, then everything they'd observed during their surveillance had been part of that operation. The people coming and going at night weren't customers buying drugs. They were either other federal agents or criminals that Elena was investigating. "Who's your contact at the bureau?" Peterson asked. Elena rattled off a name and phone number without hesitation. "But you should know that calling him right now will create problems. This operation was classified at the highest levels. Your department wasn't supposed to know about it. Then how did we get a tip about drug dealing?" Elena's expression grew serious. "That's a very good question, Lieutenant Commander. And I think the answer is going to surprise you." Peterson looked around Elena's kitchen. Now that he knew what to look for, he could see signs that this wasn't a normal house. The windows had special film on them that would prevent surveillance from outside. There were small cameras hidden in corners that he'd missed during the initial entry. Even the coffee pot looked like it might have recording equipment built into it. "How long have you been undercover?" Peterson asked. 18 months, Elena replied. "Living as Elena Vasquez, small-time dealer working her way up the supply chain of the Santos cartel. We were 3 weeks away from taking down the entire East Coast distribution network." Peterson felt sick. 3 weeks away from a major federal operation, and his team had just destroyed it all because of an anonymous tip. "Agent Vasquez," Peterson said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "We need to get you somewhere safe while we figure out how this happened." Elena shook her head. "It's too late for that. The moment your team broke down my door, the operation was over. But more importantly, someone in your department knew exactly what they were doing when they fed you that information." "What do you mean?" Elena's eyes were cold now. "Think about it, Lieutenant Commander. Someone called in an anonymous tip about drug dealing at this exact address. Someone who knew enough about what they would see during surveillance to make it look legitimate. Someone who wanted me exposed." Peterson felt a chill run down his spine. "You think someone in our department is working with the cartel?" "I don't think it," Elena said. "I know it. And now we need to figure out who it is before they realize their plan worked a little too well." Peterson stared at the FBI badge in Elena's hand, his mind struggling to make sense of what he was seeing. In 8 years of leading tactical operations, he'd never encountered anything like this. Drug dealers didn't calmly pour coffee when police broke down their doors. They definitely didn't carry federal law enforcement credentials. "Agent Vasquez," Peterson said, the title feeling foreign on his tongue. "I need to call this in to my supervisor." Elena nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Before you do that, Lieutenant Commander, you need to understand something. The moment you broke down that door, you didn't just compromise my operation, you potentially signed my death warrant." The weight of her words hit Peterson like a physical blow. He'd led hundreds of raids, but he'd never had to consider that the person they were targeting might be one of the good guys. Officer Rodriguez's voice crackled through Peterson's radio. "Lieutenant, we've got movement across the street. Someone's been watching the house from a parked car." Peterson's blood ran cold. If Elena was right about being under cartel surveillance, then whoever was watching had just seen a full tactical team raid the house of someone they thought was a drug dealer. In the criminal world, that could mean only one thing. Elena had been arrested or killed by police. "All units maintain positions," Peterson ordered through his radio. "Do not engage with any vehicles or individuals unless they pose an immediate threat." Elena was already moving, her FBI training taking over. She walked to her kitchen window and peered through the curtains without exposing herself. "Dark blue sedan," she said. 2 occupants. They've been part of the cartel's surveillance rotation for the past 6 months. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been documenting every aspect of their operation for 18 months. Those men in that car have been watching this house to make sure I'm not law enforcement." Elena's voice carried a bitter irony. "Looks like they were right to be suspicious." Peterson realized they were in the middle of a situation that was spinning out of control fast. "What do we do about them?" "Nothing for now. If we approach them, it confirms that something major just happened here. If we let them go, they'll report back that police raided the house of their drug supplier. Either way, my cover's blown." Elena walked back to the counter where she'd been making coffee when the raid started. Her movements were calm and professional, but Peterson could see the tension in her shoulders. "Agent Vasquez, help me understand something. If you're FBI, why does our informant say you're dealing drugs?" Elena paused in the middle of pouring herself a fresh cup of coffee. "What informant?" "Rico. He's been working with Detective Lopez for 2 years. He confirmed that you were moving serious weight." Elena's expression darkened. "Describe this, Rico." Peterson pulled out his phone and scrolled through the case photos until he found Rico's picture. Elena looked at it for about 3 seconds before her face went pale. "That's Carlos Rico Mendez," she said quietly. He's not your informant. He's one of the cartel's mid-level distributors. I've been building a case against him for 8 months. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, and Peterson didn't like the picture they were forming. So when Detective Lopez asked him about you, he told her exactly what the cartel wanted her to believe. That I was a reliable dealer who could be trusted with large shipments. Elena set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. Your department has been played, Lieutenant Commander. The question is whether they were played by accident or design. Peterson's radio buzzed again. This time it was Officer Chen from the back of the house. Lieutenant, you need to see what we found in the backyard shed. Peterson looked at Elena. Agent Vasquez, I need you to stay here while I check this out. I'm coming with you, Elena said firmly. If there's evidence back there, I need to see it too. They walked through Elena's house to the back door. Peterson noticed details he'd missed during the initial entry. The furniture was nice but not expensive, the kind of things a mid-level drug dealer might own, but nothing flashy enough to attract attention. It was perfect cover. In the backyard, Officer Chen was standing next to a small storage shed with its door hanging open. Inside, Peterson could see electronic equipment that definitely didn't belong to a drug dealer. Surveillance gear, Elena confirmed. High-end stuff. We've been monitoring cartel communications for months. Peterson examined the equipment more closely. It was sophisticated enough to intercept phone calls, track vehicle movements, and record conversations from a significant distance. The kind of gear that cost more than most police departments' entire annual budgets. This is what Rico meant when he said you were moving serious weight, Peterson realized. He wasn't talking about drugs. He was talking about information. Elena nodded. In the cartel world, information is more valuable than any drug shipment. I've been gathering intelligence on their entire operation. Names, locations, financial records, supply routes. Everything needed to take down their network from top to bottom. Officer Rodriguez jogged around the corner of the house, slightly out of breath. Lieutenant, that sedan across the street just pulled away. But there's something else. I recognized one of the occupants. Who? Vincent Torres. He was arrested last year for armed robbery, but the charges were dropped when the evidence went missing from our lockup. Elena and Peterson exchanged glances. Evidence didn't just disappear from police lockups without inside help. Agent Vasquez, Peterson said slowly, how many people in my department know about this case? According to my records, the information should have been limited to Detective Lopez, her partner Williams, and whoever they reported to for warrant approval. Peterson thought about the chain of command. Lopez would have reported to Sergeant Davis. Davis would have taken it to Lieutenant Morrison for warrant approval. Morrison would have briefed Peterson for the tactical operation. That's 5 people, counting myself, Peterson said. 6, if you count whoever took the anonymous call that started this whole thing. Peterson felt like ice water was flowing through his veins. Elena, that anonymous call didn't go through our normal tip line. It went directly to Detective Lopez's desk phone. They stared at each other as the implications sank in. Someone with access to internal police phone numbers had called Detective Lopez directly. Someone who knew she would be the right detective to handle a drug investigation. Someone who knew exactly how the system worked. Elena's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went even paler than before. What is it? Peterson asked. Text message from an unknown number, Elena said, showing him the screen. It says, the FBI agent is no longer useful. Remove her. Peterson's training kicked in immediately. We need to get you out of here right now. But before Elena could respond, Officer Kim's voice came through the radio with panic in his voice. Lieutenant, we've got multiple vehicles approaching fast from both ends of the street. They don't look friendly. Peterson ran to the front window and peered out. 3 black SUVs were moving down Maple Street at high speed. They weren't police vehicles and they weren't trying to be subtle. How many rounds do you have? Elena asked, checking her own weapon. Full magazine plus 2 spares, Peterson replied. But Agent Vasquez, this is my mistake. I should be the one taking the risk here. Elena looked at him with something that might have been respect. Lieutenant Commander, 18 months ago I knew this day might come. I've been preparing for it. The question is, are you and your team ready to find out which one of your colleagues just sent an execution squad to clean up their mess? Peterson keyed his radio. All units, we have hostile vehicles approaching. Take defensive positions and prepare for contact. And someone get me a direct line to FBI headquarters right now. As the black SUVs pulled up outside 1247 Maple Street, Peterson realized that what had started as a routine drug raid was about to become something much more dangerous. Somewhere in his department, someone was working with the cartel, and that someone had just decided that both Elena Vasquez and anyone who knew her secret needed to disappear. The war for 1247. Maple Street was about to begin. Elena checked her weapon one more time and looked at Peterson. "Lieutenant Commander, when this is over, we're going to need to have a very serious conversation about who in your department can be trusted." Peterson nodded grimly as the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the street outside. "Agent Vasquez, I'm starting to think that list might be shorter than either of us wants to believe." The black SUVs sat motionless on Maple Street for nearly 10 minutes. Peterson watched from Elena's front window, counting at least 8 men who had emerged from the vehicles. They weren't making any aggressive moves yet, but their positioning told him everything he needed to know. These weren't random criminals. They were trained professionals setting up a perimeter. "They're waiting for something," Elena said quietly, crouched next to Peterson at the window. "Waiting for what?" "Orders. Someone's deciding whether to try to take me alive or just eliminate everyone in this house." Peterson's radio crackled with Officer Chen's voice from the back of the house. "Lieutenant, we've got 2 more vehicles in the alley behind us. They're not moving either, just watching." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, and Peterson could see her running calculations in her head. "Lieutenant Commander, I need to tell you what we're really dealing with here. The Santos cartel isn't just moving drugs. They're moving money for 3 different terrorist organizations, and they've got law enforcement contacts in 6 states. How do you know all this? Because for 18 months I've been Elena Vasquez. Not just pretending to be her, but living her life completely. I've attended cartel meetings where they discussed bribing judges. I've been in rooms where they planned hits on federal witnesses. I've seen financial records showing payments to police officers, prosecutors, and even a federal judge." Peterson felt his stomach drop. "A federal judge?" "Judge Harrison in the Eastern District. He's been taking money to reduce sentences for cartel members. We have recordings of him discussing specific cases with Miguel Santos himself. The scope of the corruption was staggering. Peterson had always known that some criminals tried to bribe law enforcement. But this sounded like a network that reached into every level of the justice system. "Elena, if you have all this evidence, why hasn't the FBI moved already?" "Because Miguel Santos is small compared to his boss. The real target is someone called El Contador, the accountant. He's the one coordinating money movements for international criminal organizations. We've never been able to identify him, but Santos was going to introduce me to him next week." Elena's phone buzzed again. She looked at it and her expression hardened. "What now?" Peterson asked. "Text from Miguel Santos. He wants to meet with me in 2 hours. Says it's urgent and related to recent law enforcement activity in the area." Elena showed Peterson the message. "He knows about the raid?" Peterson thought about the timeline. The raid had happened less than an hour ago. For Santos to already know about it and be reaching out to Elena meant his information sources were very close to the police operation. "Agent Vasquez, someone in my department contacted Santos directly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. The anonymous tip that started your investigation didn't come from a concerned citizen. It came from someone who wanted my operation exposed." Elena stood up from the window and walked to a bookshelf in her living room. She pulled out what looked like a regular paperback novel and opened it. Inside, the pages had been cut out to create a hidden compartment containing a small device. "Recording equipment," she explained. "I've been documenting every conversation I've had with cartel members for the past 18 months. She plugged the device into her laptop, and within seconds, audio began playing through the speakers. Peterson heard Elena's voice, but she sounded different. The professional FBI agent was gone, replaced by someone who sounded like a street-smart dealer. "Miguel, you sure about this new supply route?" Elena's recorded voice asked. "Completely sure," came a man's voice with a slight accent. "My police contact confirmed they won't be watching the highway checkpoints next week." Elena paused the recording. "That conversation happened 3 weeks ago. Miguel Santos has someone inside law enforcement who's been feeding him information about police operations." Peterson's mind was racing. "Do you know which department?" "Not specifically, but I know the information is detailed and current. Someone with access to operational planning." Elena's laptop chimed with an incoming email. She opened it and her face went white. "What is it?" Peterson asked. "Message from my FBI handler. The Justice Department just received a formal complaint alleging that I've been working with the cartel instead of investigating them, complete with photographs and bank records showing payments into an account under my name. Peterson felt like he was watching a carefully constructed trap snap shut. They're framing you. Worse than that. If the Justice Department believes I've gone rogue, they'll cut off all support for this operation. No backup, no resources, no protection. I'll be completely on my own. Officer Rodriguez's voice came through Peterson's radio with urgency. Lieutenant, one of the SUVs just moved. 3 men are walking toward the front of the house. Peterson grabbed his radio. All units, hold your positions, but be ready to move. Do not engage unless they make an aggressive action. Elena was already moving, gathering files from various hiding places around her house. Lieutenant Commander, there's something else you need to know. The corruption isn't limited to your department. What do you mean? 2 months ago, I provided information to the FBI about a planned cartel shipment. The information was passed to local DEA agents for interdiction. The shipment arrived exactly as planned, but no DEA agents were there to stop it. Elena pulled a thick folder from behind her refrigerator. I started keeping parallel records after that. Every piece of information I passed to my FBI handlers I also documented independently. 3 separate operations have been compromised by leaks from federal agencies. Peterson felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. How high does this go? I don't know yet, but I know that El Contador has been operating for 5 years without being caught by any law enforcement agency. That doesn't happen by accident. A knock came at the front door. Not a police knock or an aggressive bang, but a polite, measured knock like someone making a social visit. Elena and Peterson froze. Through the window, they could see 1 man standing at the front door while 2 others flanked the sides of the house. Elena Vasquez, a voice called from outside. We need to talk. Elena looked at Peterson. That's not Miguel Santos. I don't recognize the voice. Ms. Vasquez, the voice continued, we know you're FBI, we know about your operation, and we know that your department has been compromised. Peterson and Elena exchanged glances. Whoever was outside knew more than they should. We're not here to hurt you, the voice said. We're here because someone in law enforcement just tried to have you killed, and we want to know who. Elena moved to the door but didn't open it. Who are you? Internal Affairs FBI Agent Thompson. Your handler sent us when he realized someone had filed a false complaint against you. Elena looked at Peterson. Thompson is real. But how do I know that's really him? Peterson keyed his radio quietly. Chen, can you get a visual on the person at the front door? Roger that. Male, approximately 45 years old, wearing a dark suit. He's holding what looks like federal credentials. Elena thought for a moment, then called out to the door. Agent Thompson, what was the code name for my first undercover assignment? Operation Lighthouse, came the immediate reply. You were undercover in the Martinez organization in Phoenix. Elena's shoulders relaxed slightly. That's information only my handler would know. She opened the door carefully, keeping her weapon ready. The man outside was exactly what Peterson would expect an FBI internal affairs agent to look like. Professional, serious, and completely focused. Agent Thompson looked at Elena, then at Peterson. Lieutenant Commander, we need to have a conversation about who in your department has been feeding information to the Santos cartel. You know about that? We know that someone with access to police operational planning has been compromising federal investigations for at least 6 months. What we don't know is who. Elena stepped aside to let Thompson into the house. Agent Thompson, someone in the local police department just set up an operation designed to expose my cover and get me killed. Thompson nodded grimly. We know, and we think we know who it is. Peterson felt his heart racing. Who? Thompson looked directly at Peterson. Lieutenant Commander, when you received the case file for this raid, who briefed you on the operation? Lieutenant Morrison? He approved the warrant and gave me the tactical briefing. Thompson and Elena exchanged glances. Lieutenant Morrison has been receiving $50,000 per month from the Santos cartel, Thompson said. We've been investigating him for 3 months. Peterson felt like someone had punched him in the chest. Morrison had been his colleague for 12 years. They'd worked dozens of cases together. They'd saved each other's lives. That's impossible, Peterson said. Thompson pulled out a tablet and showed Peterson bank records, phone records, and surveillance photos. Morrison meeting with known cartel members. Morrison depositing large amounts of cash. Morrison making phone calls to numbers linked to the Santos organization. Lieutenant Morrison didn't just compromise Agent Vasquez's operation, Thompson said. He's been feeding information to the cartel for 8 months. Every major drug investigation in this city has been sabotaged before it could succeed. Elena looked at Peterson with something that might have been sympathy. Lieutenant Commander, I'm sorry. I know this is hard to accept. Peterson stared at the evidence on Thompson's tablet. Morrison's betrayal explained everything. The anonymous tip that started the investigation. The way Rico had confirmed Elena was dealing drugs. Even the timing of the raid, designed to expose Elena at the moment when the cartel needed her eliminated. Agent Thompson, Peterson said quietly. What do you need me to do? Thompson's expression was grim. We need you to help us prove that Lieutenant Morrison is a traitor, and we need to do it before he realizes we're onto him. Agent Thompson's plan was simple but dangerous. Peterson would return to the police station and act like the raid had been completely successful. Elena Vasquez had been arrested as a drug dealer, and the case was closed. Meanwhile, Elena would remain in FBI protective custody while they gathered final evidence against Lieutenant Morrison. The key is making Morrison believe everything went according to his plan, Thompson explained. If he thinks Elena is in police custody, he'll contact the cartel to confirm the operation succeeded. That's when we'll have him. Peterson felt sick thinking about it, but he knew Thompson was right. Morrison had betrayed everything Peterson believed in. 12 years of partnership, and Morrison had been selling out their department the entire time. What about the cartel members outside? Peterson asked. Thompson looked out the window at the black SUVs still positioned around the house. They're going to see you leave with someone in handcuffs. As far as they'll know, Elena Vasquez was arrested, and their problem is solved. Elena was already changing clothes, putting on something that would make her look like someone who'd just been arrested. Lieutenant Commander, I need you to understand something. When this is over, Morrison isn't the only one who's going down. We've identified at least 3 other officers in your department who've been taking cartel money. Peterson's world felt like it was collapsing. 3 others? Sergeant Davis has been taking payments to make evidence disappear from lockup. Detective Williams has been sharing information about ongoing investigations, and Officer Martinez has been providing patrol schedules so cartel shipments could avoid police presence. The betrayal was so widespread that Peterson wondered who in his department could actually be trusted. People he'd worked with for years, people he'd considered friends, had been selling out their colleagues for money. How long has this been going on? Peterson asked. Thompson consulted his tablet. Based on financial records, at least 2 years, maybe longer. Elena finished changing and looked at herself in a mirror. She looked like someone who'd just been dragged out of bed and arrested, perfect for what they needed to accomplish. Are you ready for this? Thompson asked her. Elena nodded. I've been Elena Vasquez for 18 months. I can handle being Elena Vasquez under arrest for a few more hours. Peterson called his team on the radio. All units, prepare to move out. We're bringing the suspect back to the station for processing. The walk to Peterson's police car felt like the longest 100 yards of his life. Elena had her hands zip-tied behind her back, and Peterson guided her carefully to make it look realistic. The cartel members watching from their SUVs needed to believe that Elena was really under arrest. As they drove away from 1247 Maple Street, Peterson could see the black SUVs following at a distance. They were making sure Elena was really going to jail. At the police station, Peterson walked Elena through the booking process exactly as if she were a real suspect. Other officers saw her being processed, photographed, and placed in a holding cell. Word would spread quickly through the department that the drug dealer from Maple Street had been successfully arrested. Peterson waited in his office for the phone call he knew would come. It took exactly 47 minutes, Peterson. Lieutenant Morrison said over the phone. Heard you had a successful operation this morning. Yes, sir. Elena Vasquez is in custody. Found significant evidence of drug dealing at the residence. Good work. Any complications? Peterson paused, knowing that FBI agents were recording every word of this conversation. Nothing we couldn't handle. Clean operation. Excellent. I'll make sure this gets noted in your file. Peterson hung up the phone and immediately called Thompson. He took the bait. We know. We just intercepted a phone call Morrison made to Miguel Santos. He confirmed that Elena had been arrested and that the cartel's problem was solved. Peterson felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that they'd caught Morrison in the act, and sadness that it had come to this. Agent Thompson, what happens now? Now we make the arrests. Morrison, Davis, Williams, and Martinez will all be taken into custody simultaneously. We can't risk any of them warning the others. The arrests happened at 3:47 p.m. that same day. Peterson watched from his office window as FBI agents and internal affairs investigators surrounded Lieutenant Morrison in the parking lot. Morrison's face went through a series of emotions as he realized what was happening: surprise, anger, and finally resignation. Sergeant Davis was arrested at his home. Detective Williams was taken into custody during a traffic stop. Officer Martinez was arrested while on patrol, with FBI agents taking him into custody in front of the convenience store he was supposed to be protecting. The news spread through the police department like wildfire. 4 officers arrested for corruption, millions of dollars in cartel bribes, federal investigations that had been compromised for years. Peterson found himself in the uncomfortable position of being one of the few senior officers who hadn't been arrested. The FBI asked him to help with the transition, while they investigated the full extent of the corruption. Elena was released from protective custody 3 days later. The fake charges against her were dropped, and she was able to return to her FBI duties. But her undercover operation was over. 18 months of work, she said as she and Peterson met for coffee a week after the arrests, all destroyed because of one corrupt cop. I'm sorry, Peterson said. Morrison was my responsibility. Elena shook her head. You couldn't have known. Morrison was very good at hiding what he was doing. What happens to your investigation now? We start over. The Santos organization has been badly damaged by the arrests, but they're not completely destroyed. Miguel Santos is in federal custody, but El Contador is still out there. Peterson stirred his coffee thoughtfully. Do you think you'll be able to get him? Eventually. People like El Contador always make mistakes. It just takes time to catch them. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both thinking about everything that had happened. Agent Vasquez, Peterson said finally, that morning when we broke down your door, did you know one of my officers was corrupt? Elena considered the question carefully. I suspected it. Too many operations had been compromised for it to be coincidence. But I didn't know who. What gave Morrison away? The timing. The anonymous tip came exactly when it would do the most damage to our operation. Someone with detailed knowledge of police procedures had planned the whole thing. Peterson thought about all the cases Morrison had worked over the years. How many investigations had he sabotaged? How many criminals had escaped justice because Morrison had warned them? The hardest part, Peterson said, is wondering what else I missed. Elena looked at him with understanding. You can't blame yourself for trusting a colleague. Morrison spent years building a reputation as a good cop. He fooled everyone. 6 months later, Peterson received a call from Elena. Lieutenant Commander, she said. Thought you'd want to know. We got El Contador. How? Morrison. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided information about his contacts in the cartel. Let us write to him. Peterson felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that the investigation had finally succeeded, but also continued disappointment in Morrison's betrayal. What's his real name? Robert Chen. Turns out he's an accountant from Los Angeles who was helping criminal organizations move money through legitimate businesses. He was hiding in plain sight. Peterson thought about the morning when everything had started with a simple anonymous tip. None of them could have predicted where it would lead. Agent Vasquez, Peterson said, thank you for trusting me that day. I know it couldn't have been easy. Lieutenant Commander, that badge you saw in my kitchen saved both our lives. If I hadn't been able to prove who I was, that situation could have ended very differently. Peterson agreed. The badge that had seemed so impossible that morning had been the key to everything that followed. Any regrets? Peterson asked. Elena was quiet for a moment. Just one. I wish we could have caught Morrison before he had a chance to do so much damage. Peterson understood. The betrayal had hurt more than just their investigation. It had damaged trust between federal and local law enforcement. It had allowed criminals to operate freely for months, and it had put Elena's life in danger. But in the end, justice had been served. Morrison and his co-conspirators were in federal prison. The Santos cartel had been dismantled, and El Contador's money laundering operation had been destroyed. Sometimes, Peterson reflected, that was the best you could hope for. Not a perfect outcome, but justice eventually served. The badge Elena had flashed that morning had been more than just identification. It had been a symbol of the law enforcement officers who still believed in doing the right thing, even when their colleagues had forgotten what that meant.